Sister Joseph Andrew, OP, Dominican. And she was scheduled to do one in March, last March, was it, or November? I don't remember. But she calls me and she says, Father. And whenever she says that and calls me, I listen. She says, Father. And she says, I'm not going to be able to come and be with you. And she had been, I'll let her tell you the story, but she had been for her physical at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and they found cancer. And so, but she's here. She's here.
Thank you, Father. Father's going to be surprised because that's not the story I'm going to tell you.
Oh, well, I'll tell it later. I'll tell it later. She went to 3 medical centers.
That's true.
University of Michigan, Mayo Clinic, and MD Anderson. Then
That's
she went to Medjugorje.
He knows more about me than I do. That is the truth, though. That is the truth. But what I wanted to say is I have to kind of laugh as I think, Father, I want to thank you for giving me the 3 o'clock Divine Mercy hour. And I know you didn't give me the entire hour, but I want to thank you because I'm also realizing anybody that exists this makes it to this point gets extra credit in heaven. So thank you all. Actually, I really do want to begin with thanking all of you all. I know how much this means to Father. I know how much it means to everyone who has worked so hard on this, and to the known and the unknown, but known by our mother and raised up by her to her son's heart. And so I just think this whole thing is just absolutely so beautiful. And for each person who has come, each came at some point of a sacrifice, I'm sure. And these sacrifices are good for us. Okay, I want to begin by saying all of us have miracle stories, I do believe. I think miracles happen every single day of our lives. Whether or not we recognize them is the big question. Sometimes we just kind of say, oh, whew, that was good luck. Or, oh, thank goodness, I can't believe it happened, but it did. But in reality, I believe the Eucharist and Mary's heart give us miracles constantly. And so the miracle that I want to tell you about, Father, which you don't know, is it began many years before my life began. And it began with the family of my father. And so Władysław Andrzej Bogdanowicz from Poland. And so born actually in Massachusetts area. But at any rate, he born into a very Catholic family. I will never be able to thank God enough for both my parents. And I'll tell you about my mom in just a minute. And then a huge miracle. And I'm watching the time. So I'm doing what you told me. So at any rate, born into a super Catholic family, the suffering makes you great if you use it for the glorification of God. And the suffering, Father John Anthony mentioned the Bolshevik Revolution, which is what brought my father's family over here. And they were raised to love the Catholic faith. God, number one. Mary, number two. But really, sometimes, as my father would say, and it reminded me of Pope St. John Paul the Great, who one time wrote, could I possibly love Mary too much? And I don't love Jesus as much? That would be horrible. And then, if you remember, he was in the clandestine seminary in Poland at the time he wrote that, and he had that temptation, and it was Juan Tiranovsky who gave him St. Louis de Montfort, a Dominican, his book on total consecration to Mary, which became, obviously, as we all know, his papal motto, totus tuus, to Jesus, through her, no other way. It's the way to go. Okay, we could talk about that, but I want to move on to say, my father reminded me of that because every once in a while he'd say, honey, do you think I love Mary too much? And I'd go, it's impossible. And just give me some of that love, which I think I do have, partly because when he met first of all, he was in the Second World War in the Army Corps of Engineers, and because he was so independent thinking and didn't really obey real well, which I had to not imitate, which took me many years of my life to understand. In any case, he was pulled into the CIA. And story after story, when he eventually told us of how his life was almost taken from him, it was all because he would say, I had my rosary and my hand was in my pocket, and Mary saved me, Mary saved me, Mary saved me. And we knew what that meant. And so then he decides after the war that he is either going to enter the Trappist monastery in Gethsemane, Kentucky, because he had helped found Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which is where I was born and raised, and the whole Manhattan Project, on and on go the stories. But it was always Mary, and I have his dog tags, and on them he has those multitudinous in one medals that says on the back real big, I am a Catholic. In case of accident, please call a priest. I don't know how he got by with wearing that, but he did. And a miraculous medal, and he carried his rosary. Then he meets this Baptist girl, much longer story, but he says, honey, if this relationship's going anywhere, you have to become Catholic. She asks, what's Catholic? And then 2 months later, she gets baptized in the Catholic Church, receives her first goes to her confession, is confirmed. 2 days later, they're married, and my mother's first Holy Communion was at their wedding. So the faith was everything. And I wanted it. We always prayed the family rosary. Don't ever think you can't get your kids to pray the family rosary. You set the rules, and the kids kind of have to do something about it, because we wiggled every direction to get out of the family rosary, every direction. And we would say, we'll go out there and evangelize all these Protestant kids all over the place. That didn't work. We would wave our medals around, our medals on our chains, and say, we don't have school tomorrow because we're Catholics and it's a holy day of obligation. Anyway, on and on go the stories. But if there is someone who made my family what my family is and showed me my vocation, there she is. Jesus through her, but we were raised with such love of Mary because she was mom. So it's been ahead a number of years, and Mother Assumpta missioned me to an all-girls high school in Maryland. And it was 1983, 84 school year. And another sister was there. Well, there were 5 other sisters, but she and I kind of knew each other to be more devotional. And so she found out that rumor has it that Mary is appearing in Yugoslavia. I'm like, we got to go. How can we get there? Well, we didn't end up going. But everything we could get our hands on, we read, we shared with each other. There were ancient videotapes back then, and you would see these little bitty kids kneeling and staring up, and then the electrical things they try to put on them, the scientist to disprove, on and on and on. I am so grateful I remember the early days. And then Mother Assumpta was getting to go over there, and I was just green. I was so jealous. She got to go, and she told us a little bit about her story. So I just kept praying, Mary, when you want me to go, I'm ready. I'm ready to, you just, figure it out somehow. So I'd say through 3 miracles, I got to go in 1989, 1991, and then 6 months ago, Mother Assumpta and I both went back in Thanksgiving. But we get a week home every summer to visit our families, which is really important. Again, it's from the families that you come and you realize your vocation and you live your vocation, and your family is essential. We need to get back to good, holy Catholic families. So as my parents are getting older, when I would visit, my sister is also a sister. So she's 2 years older than me. And at 17, she entered the convent. At 17, 2 years later, I entered the convent. Both Dominicans, yes. So in any case, both in our community now in Ann Arbor. But in any case, I can remember going home and just watching my father, who was really going down. Now, he was the Rock of Gibraltar. He never complained about anything. He was strong. And all of a sudden, he started not looking too good. And so that went on for maybe about a year. And then I start saying, smart, Mom, Don't you want to go to Medjugorje? Mary's appearing. We can read all we want to about Fatima, which we were big Fatima people, Fatima and Lourdes. But you can be there when Mary's appearing at Medjugorje. Can you believe that we can't miss this chance? And Mom said, I'd love to go. And I said, well, what's keeping you two? And she said, your father. And I'm like, what? My father doesn't want to go see Mary? She said, well, honey, there's something going on with this health, and I don't know what it is. So I'm praying and praying. So I go, okay, Daddy, what is it? What's going on with you? And he goes, honey, I'm just getting older. And I'm like, that's a bunch of baloney. Like I'm not and everybody else alive isn't. So then I pick up the phone and I call the doctor, who is a Catholic doctor, Polish Catholic doctor. And I'm going, okay, I want you to level with me. What is going on with my father? What do you mean? Excuse me? What do I mean? Aren't you a doctor? His health is going down rapidly, and you've got to know that. He's getting older. I'm like, I've heard that answer before. So then I get in the car and I go out to visit the doctor. I'm going, tell me to my face one more time that my father's getting older. And so he said, well, he is. I'm like, is that all you're going to say? Yes, that's it. And I've got another patient waiting. Oh, I'm so angry. So I leave. So I go back home. And I just said, okay, this is ridiculous. Mom wants to go to Medjugorje, Daddy. Why aren't you going to take her? And he looked terrible. He was just ashen and just didn't look at all. And he said, well, honey, how much does she want to go? And I'm like, oh, this is beyond the beyond. You would definitely want to go see Mary, and you know you want Mom to. What's going on? So then he said to Mom, her nickname is Penny. He said, Penny, what will you do if I die? And Mom looked at him and she goes, oh, Walter, I'll bury you. So Daddy turns around and says, okay, I guess we're going to go. And I'm like, whatever. So then I said, go get something nice on, because we're going to go get the passport pictures. And we ran that very day. We got the passport pictures and we filled out all the stuff. And we lived 200 miles from Nashville. The pilgrimage I wanted them to go on left out in Nashville, so they have to get themselves there. So by the time I went back to the convent after my home visit, everything was in the mail. They had to get their passports. They didn't have passports anyway. So then I was novice mistress at the time. Mother Assumpta had given me that beautiful responsibility. And so I had all the novices and postulants really praying that this was going to work out for my parents. And I kept worrying about my father, because this just wasn't his normal energetic self. Anyway, so finally I get a letter and Mom says, well, my passport arrived, but your father's didn't. And I'm like, oh, well, it'll arrive soon, I'm thinking. So then I get permission at that point in time. We had to get permission to call. So I'm calling. I'm like, okay, this has been several days now. Did your passport arrive? And my father said, no, honey. And I said, well, you know, something's going on, but we're going to win this. And he goes, well, you know, if it doesn't, I can go right down the street to St. Mary's and go right in front of God himself, and Mary's right where Jesus is. I'm like, okay, we're getting you to Medjugorje. You are going to Medjugorje. You pray. She never says no to you. So we're praying and praying. I've got the novices praying. Everybody's praying. Call a couple times. It's getting very close to when they'd have to get in the car and drive 200 miles to Nashville to get on the plane with this group that was the pilgrimage group. So praying and praying. It gets to be 2 days before they'd have to leave. And so I call and I'm like, surely you got it by now. We're talking months. And my father said, no, it hadn't come. I'm going, you only have 2 more chances. So I call my brother, who is in Boston, working in Boston, where my father's originally from. And I said, Michael, find out what in the world's going on. So he calls me back and he goes, they have a different birth date for Daddy than the one he turned in. I'm going, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard of. We all know when he was born. So call the files, and they say, well, the only thing you can do is they're a living relative. Now get all this. So everybody's got their story. Is there a living relative that can come? And they said this, swear on the Bible. I'm like, well, this has got some spiritual power behind it. That this is her or his brother, and he was born on this date. So I call back my brother and go get Aunt Jenny. She's like 100 miles away. Bring her, get her to swear on the Bible. This is her brother and this is the Oh my gosh, can you imagine all this? Well, you know who you're fighting, which just gets you stronger for the fight, doesn't it? So they do that. And then I'm calling over there saying, okay, now that you have what you need, you get that in overnight. I don't care how expensive it is. It's got to get there tomorrow. It didn't come the next day. I'm like, I cannot believe this. So the last day was the following day. So I call and my father says, well, honey, we can't go. I'm not getting my passport. And I go, oh no, you're going to go. You're going to go. She is really after you. And he's like, well, I just don't know that I have the energy to keep fighting this. I'm like, you don't need to. You just let her do it. She's perfectly capable of smashing that snake. So in any case, the mail finally comes. And my father says, what do we do about tomorrow? Because we have to go. And I said, put the bags in the car, lock up the doors. You and Mom sit in the car until the mailman comes get your passport out of the mailbox and go. Next day comes, mailman comes, there they are. My father goes down to the mailbox, gets his passport out of the mailbox, comes back, and they take off for Nashville. So I meet them in Nashville, and they're getting on the plane, and my father, who usually carries everybody's luggage and is just so happy and everything else, is just almost crawling on the floor. He's so exhausted. And I'm like, Mom, what's going to happen? She goes, I don't know. I can't figure it out. And I'm going, well, Mary will take care of you two. I just know she will. So they leave. And as the plane, I can still see myself. I ran over to the window as the plane's going up in the sky to go to Medjugorje. I just burst into tears going, is this the last time I'm going to see him alive? No, this is a temptation. Mary, you've got to do this. You've got to do this. And I know you will. So then the days pass. This is 1986. No communication back then. Waiting. I thought, well, if anything happened, I guess I'd hear something. Finally, it comes the night that they land. They've come back from Medjugorje. And I'm standing there. This is, of course, before 9/11 and everything else. And I hear my father's voice way down the thing, as you come up the thing. And he's laughing and he's speaking Polish nonstop and he's coming up and I'm like, what in the world? And he's got all these people's bags and Monsignor Rowling's bags and all these. And he comes over and I said, Mom, what happened to Daddy? And she said, well, he went up the mountain. He insisted on climbing up. I couldn't do it, but he insisted. He pulled himself up that mountain of apparition. And he came back looking like this. And I looked at my father and he said, are you talking about me? And I'm going, of course we're talking about you. And all he could say was, she's there, she's there, she's there. And he said it over and over and over and over again. That's all he could say. So they go back to Oak Ridge and he goes to the doctor. And the doctor said, well, I'm canceling the hospital bed that I had for you just in case you did make it back. And he said, he did this red blood count test, and he said, when you left here, you were at 15. He said, you didn't have much further down to go. You shouldn't get on a plane at that situation. And he said, now your blood count is 38. Mine's 32. You're healthier than I am. And my father just kept saying, she's there, she's there. And he said it over and over and over again. There's so many more stories that I really could tell you because I just think, which has been said by everybody, we're living in a great age. I think this is a fantastic age. Mary must think it too, or she certainly wouldn't keep coming every single day for 40-something years. We're living in a great age, and what does this age demand? She looks at the likes of us, and she must think that we can have the depth of faith that this age is requiring of us. We don't have it easy, and yet we have everything we need. And every time she comes, we hear how beautiful her expression is, and Father Leon was certainly telling us that. And I'm just thinking, I can't wait to get to heaven. I'm going to be like a lightning bolt heading towards her. But imagine how she loves us. In the history of the church, I am pretty sure there's never been an apparition of the Mother of God in which she has come faithfully for 42, going on 43, going on for, well, whatever it might be, number of years. This is an extraordinary time for us to be alive. And I remember growing up too and loving Our Lady of Fatima and just thinking, oh, if I could just see her eyes, if I could just look at her. Well, if she appears to these three little kids, why not me too? Mary, I just don't get it. I mean, you can do whatever you want to do, but I'm just saying I'm ready too. I mean, here, you know. Well, of course, it didn't happen to me. But when I went to Medjugorje, I'm like, I finally got it. She's looking right at me. And she's loving me in a manner of unconditional love. This is something so strange to the world today. People will love you if you prove yourself, meaning if you support them, if you're there for them, if you're constantly their doormat, basically, not if you stand up for something and say something they disagree with. This is the age, has been brought out, of white martyrdom. And I think white martyrs are only real if we die with smiles on our faces. And so I want to challenge all of us to love Jesus in Mary, Mary, Mother of the Eucharist, to go to Medjugorje if you can, and if you can't, to unite yourself to her, where she's coming down to earth every single day. My goodness, what kind of love does the mother have that she comes to us every single day? No excuses, like I was busy in heaven. Sorry, can't come. I'm going to go on vacation. Y'all have seen me for enough time. Every single day, she makes time for us. She comes to us. And again, we're getting ready to celebrate the Mass. Make sure you don't eat or drink. Well, eat, because it's your fasting time. I want to make sure that I say that. But when Jesus comes to us, so does his mother. They have the same DNA. He got it from her. And I'll end with this quote. Father, I'm giving you a little extra time. I could keep going. Normally, he's not this passive. I'm not sure what's going on. And I'll end with this beautiful quote of John Paul II that I think when I received Holy Communion. And he says, the Eucharist has the taste and the aroma of Mary. Wow. When we go to her, she gives us Jesus. When we receive communion, I always think she's the one teaching me how to love him more. And, people complain. As long as we are good Catholics in the state of grace and can receive Jesus in Holy Communion, we really have no big complaints. Yes, we have sufferings, and those are real. And these sorrowful mysteries of the Rosary, you're not going to get to the glorious if you don't get your sorrowful. So just know this is all meant to be, and it's making us the saints this crazy world needs today. And if we need any proof of that, go to Medjugorje. Consider Our Lady of Medjugorje. Every day, faithfully, our mother comes to us. Do we need any more proof than that? Thank you.